First, mic check. Hope I'm audible. Great. So I'll start with a question. Do you know, who are the most hopeful people in a conference? People like me, who is coming towards the end. They'll be hoping that people will be here, and that also leads to the second question: who are the most courageous people in a conference?
Who come first? Stay at the end.
Yes. So yeah, clap to you guys for doing that. All right, so I'm going to talk about the side of open source you neglect most, and to some extent, some of the points that I'll be mentioning maybe will be similar to what Aditya mentioned, but where Aditya was more focusing on the community aspect of it, I will rather go on individual aspect of it, of open source. All right, so let's get started. Yeah, I've spent close to 2 decades now, developing software, shipping software, developing people and things like that. So I don't kind of limit myself to any stack at this point of time. It's a kind of demand stack. Wherever it's required, I try to pitch in. Technology blogger, have been writing for last 3 to 4 years. I call myself teacher because I'm truly teaching on YouTube. That's what I'm focusing on, and have a very fancy name of my channel called Tapas JavaScript. Very recently, I founded a company called Creobase. We are trying to do something. Let's see if we will be successful in coming years. And of course, I'm an open source enthusiast. I have a community called ReactPlay. You can check it out on reactplay.io. All right, so before we get started, Aditya asked a question like, how many of you have participated in open source as a contributor or maintainer? My question is a little different. How many of you have a project that you wanted to push as an open source project but haven't done it? Okay. How many of you wanted to contribute to open source project but haven't done it? Okay, so you guys will really relate to this talk along with the folks who are already contributing or maintaining open source project. Great. So the guy that you see in the middle is one of us in this room. And what we do at the daily basis, if you can't read all of this text around it, it's fine. But I'll just take a quick look at that. You do coding, you do design, you do test, you do deployment, you take care of performances, you take care of security, you build solution, you do UX, you do all these things. Maybe as an individual, you are not doing everything, but at least some part of it you are doing. And if you don't find your role over here, we have a problem. So I'll move on. So this is you. Now, if you think, you just replace yourself with what you see in the center is a product, any product. That product also will have some of the work that you are already doing as an individual. It may have UX, it will have its design, it has its test phase, it has security concerns, it has performance and everything. Now hold these 2 slides in your brain for now. You and the product, okay? Now I'll move into this. If you have a product, it cannot really run it by itself. So like us human, there is a way that we came to in this world. For product also, for it to come to this world, there will be something like source code. We all have to write some source code. So end of it, it will be like bundle, build, and it will be like an end product that our customers will use. Now, if the source code is open for view, open for change, open to extend, and sometime open to distribute, we call this openness as open source. I'm just defining this for pieces for folks who may be new to this, open source stuff. Now, if this is open source, the product that was in the picture, we call it as open source software. So the definition is clear to everyone, like what is open source and open source software. Now going back to those 2 slides, where it was you and then by product. So if I can just replace you and product, I can replace it with open source, isn't it? So a product which can be open source, that means you as an individual have an opportunity to do design, coding, testing, whatnot that you do or you want to kind of learn and execute in your real life. So open source provide you that opportunity. So this is, all this drama that I did in front of you is just to set that stage that what open source is capable of. And if you're still thinking where to get your journey started and whether I am eligible or I am really good enough to get started with open source, I think got your answer. So if you found your capability in any of those things, you have, your way to get into open source. Right, but how does it work? Let's take a quick look at it. Usually, these folks don't go by the color. I don't know, the color is visible. The center one is a little bluish and the around one is whitish. The center one is a maintainer of a project and the whitish one of the contributor. Though I should not be differentiating them from color, caste, religion. but I thought of doing so because, see, it's been 7 years I'm contributing to open source. It's been 4 years I'm maintaining an open source project. So I know it's not balanced. I know where the equilibrium is little down, okay? So that's why the extra weightage to the maintainer. But when they come together, they build something called community, an open source community. That's what Aditi was also talking about. And then of course you have source code. Without that, you don't have project. So they contribute to the source code. What happens when they contribute to source code? There will be something which will do the source code control, version control. One of our friends who spoke about GitHub. GitHub is the de facto factor right now. So you have a repository. People fork the repository, do their change, merge their change, fork the repository, do their change, merge their change. At the end of it, you have a build and deploy cycle. You deploy it somewhere, your user is getting it. Like any other normal product development cycle today, open source also works almost in the similar line. Only difference is, when you're working in an office, say Google office, I know my employee very closely. In open source, it is very, very hard sometimes to know like who is sitting other side. That is where the challenge is, and that is where the benefit also. Unfortunately, some people are selling it in the wrong way. I have heard saying like, if you can work with a person whom you don't know, and if you can survive anywhere in this world. Yes, that's true, but may not be true for everyone. It depends on the interpersonal skill. It depends on what kind of survival you have been through in the open source. Whether the person with whom you have interacted and he felt like, man, he should not come back, right? So what you have done, it all depends on that, right? It should not be taken at the face value of it. Okay, let's talk about contributors once quickly. Who are the contributors and what they can do? Of course, if you go to a project, you can add a feature. You know, this is a product. I feel that there is no Google Map in that product. I want to integrate Google Map. Yeah, if it is in the roadmap of that particular project, you can always do that. You can fix issues. Every maintainer in this world will treat you like their kid if you come and tell that, okay, I want to fix some issues in your project. Okay, so you can fix issues. You can do documentation. Nothing can replace documentation. In my sense, that nothing can replace documentation. Of course, there are things like predicted bits. Being a YouTuber, I can say that even no videos can come in front of documentation. Documentation has its own league. Okay. Prove me wrong. You can improve UX. You can do code reviews. Aditya was talking about that. You can write content. You can give feedback for that particular project. You can test it out. You can build community around it. You can integrate with another project, give it a completely new dimension. You can do advocacy. You can become a dev advocate, dev relations, or you can do anything possible in that particular project. So as a contributor, you have really open field of what you want to do. Okay. So this is something to highlight. If somebody is thinking still like where I can go and start contributing, you can go to a project, you can go to the community, and you can ask for any of this which really matches your skill or you want to improve your skill. But the main question is, why should you even care? Why should you even go for any kind of contribution and things like that? I think this is where some of the problem got started very recently. The message is not very clear, like why somebody should go and do this open source thing. There are a lot of misconceptions around, like, if you do open source, you get a job, you do this, blah, blah, blah thing. I think you should not be looking into like those lenses. There should be some kind of purity when you're going for open source, stock. How I started, I had a customer, I was working in an MNC, and there was a bug. It was in a server called Jetty. I don't know how many of you have heard about it. So part of Jetty was open source, and there was a bug. My customer told me, we need to fix this bug. I went to that open source community and he told that, okay, it depends, maybe next release, which is after 3 months, that is when we'll be able to fix it. And then it took me some time to look into the code. I found that thing is quite easy. Believe me, I just put a pull request, it was accepted, and we got it back and we made the customer happy. Then I came to know there is something called open source. So for me, their intention was completely different. It was not like I am a noble person going and helping out of the community. But when I started understanding, like if I am doing this, it is not only me who is getting benefit out of it. Maybe like me, there are other person who is also looking for similar kind of fix. They will get this fix because this is quite open. So when you go to open source, make sure that you know like what's your motive. Some people go there for upskilling. They don't know React. They want to learn React. They come to React, for example. They don't know certain technology. They go there and they learn about it. So it's upskilling. Joy of making things better. This something should come from heart. Like if you really like okay, building this feature really kick you. Go and do that. Networking and communities. Nowadays it is more. I mean, I'm part of a community which also does physical meetup, but it should not be taken for granted. I mean, you should not be forming just communities after communities so that you just go around, have fun, eat pizzas, drink beer, and come home. It's not like that. There should be some kind of tangible outcome. Like you discuss, like in that community meetup, physical community meetup, what's the next feature that you can plan? You guys have come here. How many of you are willing to contribute? Let's fill up this form. I'm going to touch base with you after this. This Google form you fill up, and let's take it from there. So there should be tangible around the project and the product when you're actually doing community. So networking and community is a good part, but it has to be taken in correct way. Of course, as an individual, especially when we're starting our journey, we might know like how development works. We might know a bit of how unit testing, if at all you guys do it, works, but we may not know the entire product development lifecycle. I believe that open source is a place where if you want, you can know the entire product development lifecycle. Like starting from how the things get designed, because everything is really crystal clear in front of you. And if it is not an open source project, right? So you have that opportunity of understanding product lifecycle. You get mentoring, not everywhere, but in some communities you definitely get mentoring. I also have an opportunity to mentor others. It's back your portfolio. It is good. I won't say good. It is great to add your open source contribution on your resume. But you should not go to open source thinking that next day you will get a job. I would say if you have contributed to open source, put that contribution at the top of your resume. But don't bank on that alone to get a job. This is a very clear statement. There are a lot of misconception today. Till talking about open source, just talking about okay, do it, get a job, do it, get a job. It's not like that. You have to really prove your point in that interview room. So you can still back your portfolio and you learn how to maintain. When you have an open source project and you are actually seeing like how somebody is closing issues, managing releases, automatically you figure out your stuff like, if I have a project, tomorrow, how am I going to pitch it as an open source maintainer? So that's about the contributor story. What are the prerequisites you need? In this, again, it's probably my experience, it can differ. I think the primary thing that you need is curious mind. Not in any open source project, you will find the great soul who is sitting beside you and tell that, hey, go to line number 54, column number 72 and fix that issue. You won't find it. They will tell there is an issue, go figure it out. And next thing what they will ask, you figured it out, document it. So that others also come to know, okay? So you should have a curious mind to figure out things by yourself. If there is a lack of documentation, it's your opportunity to create an open source documentation and opportunity for your contribution. Okay? Perseverance, you have to, you have created a PR, your maintainer is not looking into it, you are frustrated because this is second day of your PR creation, you somehow got the phone number of your maintainer, sending a WhatsApp message at night 11 o'clock, getting more frustrated 2 o'clock calling. It happened. Oktoberfest time, it happened to me. 2 o'clock I got called, hey, you have to merge this PR because I have to meet my goal of 4 PRs. It's almost 29th of the month. So these are not great thing. I mean, it's okay if you don't be in that frame of Oktoberfest. It's okay if you don't get the t-shirt. It's fine. If your motive is that you will be doing it for the project, you see long term. Don't see short term. See, Oktoberfest, they stop giving t-shirt now. What do you do? So anyway, and then you need to learn a bit of Git basics, GitHub familiarity, these are the things required. You need to know a little bit of Markdown because most of the documentation happened there. Adhikary was talking about the patience, I would say, I already called out, and being humble and responsive. The incident happened like, you take an issue, then you go to honeymoon, you come back after 15 days. That time, probably maintainer got frustrated, assigned that issue to somebody else. Then you start blaming the maintainer. Man, why? What happened? This issue was mine. Then you never made a comment that you are going to come back after 2 weeks. This issue was urgent. I had to get it done, right? So be humble, be responsiveness, have responsiveness. Like tell that when you are available versus when you are not available, and when you can take versus you can't take. From the maintainer point of view, we understood from the contributor point of view, the maintainer point of view, again the same guy, but the roles changes. Of course, every maintainer has to be a contributor, but there are always plus few things. So the things that I discovered maintaining projects for the last 3 to 4 years is like a few things. You have to manage issues, you have to manage your tech debts, you have to have vision for the project, you have to build a community. You cannot be a person who says yes. You have to learn say no. That was probably the #1 challenge that I faced in my first year. When the issue comes, can I take this up? Can you add it to the roadmap? It was always like, oh, I need more contributors. Okay, let's say yes. And that is where I was going wrong. I identified after 1 year. Because that person, the smart guy, given that particular issue, and they never came back. So the retention of the contributor is completely missed out. The way a maintainer should act, he should always like look for future. If there's a contributor coming, make the contributor learn the project, learn the product. Make them hang around with some community member who is already old. And let them glue together, have friendships, have offline talk. Make them feel that this is something that they own. So that once you leave that community, in any case, the community will really go, the open source project will really go on. So there are a lot of stuff that maintainer has to do. He has to prioritize. Cannot take every issues. Need to do the release planning. The community building, I told you, the collaboration. I think there is always a saying in open source is like they collaborate first, code next. If you can't collaborate, I think whatever, Einstein you are, you really cannot really do good open source or cannot build stuff. Because you are very stubborn that certain way you are doing things is always right. And you are not able to convince and being arrogant, I don't think that any maintainer would look into it, even if it's a great feature. They won't merge your peer. So the attitude also matter, not for the contributor, also for the maintainer, for both the sides. All right, so few things before I go to few other more things is like, for a maintainer, if you want to be a maintainer, if you wish to put your open source project in for maintenance, you have to have these qualities. You got to be proactive. In a sense, it's like you have to sense what someone is going to do. This comes by experience, and you take call. You have to have a very clear communication. When you say no, it's no. You need to have a mentorship mindset. Like there will be somebody coming. There are a lot of talk about README update. Personally, I don't feel README update is bad, because if somebody doing a meaningful README update, there must be some issue so why somebody is doing it. But again, if you see that there is a spamming, what do? You block that guy? I won't block that person. Probably I try to understand like what is causing it. The cause maybe, the trigger may be something else. And if you fix that trigger, that contributor could be your #1 contributor, who knows? So you have to talk to the person, you have to mentor, you have to actually spend some time. You have to provide and seek help from your community, other community, and you have to encourage automation. This is one thing that if you want to start your open source project, you have to think about automation. You cannot do everything. You have to do like, after 15 days, mark the issue as stale. After 30 days, close the issues automatically if nobody is taking it up. You cannot sit and start doing all these things. So you have to write those actions, you have to find those things, and you have to start doing this automation stuff. And of course, you have to learn to say no. Okay, having said all these things, let's move to little bit other side. And the other side is all about balancing. Okay, that's what I'm saying, that equilibrium stuff. How many of you think this is right? You think open source is not a charming thing? I also think that open source is not a charming thing, but unfortunately, this is how it's happening. Open source is a charming thing. Why? Because we are talking about it a lot nowadays, and for a lot of different kind of reasons. The reasons that I spoke till now are so valid. Once you become an open source contributor, if you already are an open source contributor, you probably already agree with me, or if you want to be open source maintainer, those are the things you need to keep in mind. But the things that we are going to talk about is something that probably you don't have to keep in mind so much, but is happening around the world. That's what making open source a very charming thing, okay, in a negative way. No talk in open source in 2024 is complete without this screenshot. We spoke about it at least 3 times. I marked those names in black. I don't want those names to come out, but it's still available. And this is what the maintainers probably will be doing. So when you are going to the other side of the story is like when you are going for a contribution, the first question you need to ask yourself, why? Why do you want to contribute? If, believe me, if this the swag is the thing that you are looking for, there are other ways to get swag without frustrating a maintainer. Go for other events, guys. Don't come to open source. To be very honest, like you ask yourself why. Second is don't be misguided. Aditya was asking my question in the beginning, like how many of you, went to that YouTube video or taken the things like, how to contribute to open source. I think it's very, very legal question to ask to ourselves. You should do that. How to contribute to open source, why to contribute to open source. That education is definitely required, otherwise you'll be misguided. There are people who are there to misguide us and will be misguided. You should be driven by passion. When you talk about the passion, I'll keep it to yourself, like what's your passion, and based on that you should be driven. And then you should ask, are you solving any problem or are you creating more by contributing, right? So if you're solving any problem, great. But if you're creating problems, see, at some time in our mind somewhere we'll be honest, even if you're not honest to somebody else. So we'll be honest, like I'm really solving a problem, I'm really not solving a problem. If you feel that you're not solving a problem, don't go. Do it before pitch. If you want to talk about open source, if you want to educate people about open source, first contribute. If you want to be a maintainer of open source, first contribute. Don't try to be a maintainer of open source or any project without a single contribution. What will happen? You will lose your interest, to be very honest. So if you want to really do, please do that. Any small contributions are welcome as long as it is valuable. The last word is very important, valuable, okay? Including README. Now when all these things happen, from the maintenance point of view, usually when you start with a project, there will be usually 3 categories of project. You all can relate. One is fun project, night, idea aaya, morning, we have coded and the thing is ready. That's the easy project. And you can boast about it to your friend and everybody. All of us do this. The second project is little serious. It's like a small to big term. Money aayega. It's like that kind of, we can do it a product and things like that. And the third kind of project is like quite complex, right? It is like SaaS deployment, it is having a user management, licensing and all these things. Usually, these are the three categories of project. The first category, not a problem. It's a small one. As long as the community is small, the contributors are in some small number, it will go great. The moment you move from the small to the mid one, that's when the problems start coming. When you're in the mid one, as a maintainer, you will find a lot of people coming to contribute. And you have your strategy, own strategy, like how do you want to kind of really safeguard yourself, you don't burn out, you sleep well, at the same time your project goes on. And the last one is more actually bad. In a sense, it's like this project is something that everybody wants. It's a good project, large project. I'm in Google Office, but I'm talking about like, every other corporates. I know how they're treating this large project because they are free, they're open. And what kind of justice that is bringing to those maintainers, those are the things to be thought about, okay? So these projects, most of the maintainers that they leave, they don't want to continue, is either of this factor. Either they don't get time because the project has gone really bigger, they don't have enough time to give, they don't have any interest because some big guy has come, some big corporate has come and told this project has to have different kind of dimension. Now it was an open source of Mr. XYZ, from now it is an open source of XY ABC Corp. So the lack of interest, like my initial vision is gone. It's your vision to take it up. Lack of support. This is something most of us are suffering from. You do stuff and what you get, not even peanuts. Peanuts will be more tastier. You don't get anything. You get some appreciation somewhere. Maybe open source is one of the reasons that I'm standing here and speaking in front of you. But that's it. What are my other contributors getting? They're also equally contributing. I can't give them swag. Okay, so lack of support, of course, lack of discipline. Some of the maintainers, they exit early because there is no discipline, they don't raise their issues, they don't maintain their communities and etc. Security vulnerability is another thing. Matlab, you take an NPM from anywhere, man, go blindly, download an NPM. Don't even look into the history of it. You make it work. Next day, somebody who is consuming your open source project, they are running the security vulnerability scan and they are actually identifying 46 new vulnerability has come out. Who is sensible? Now you are telling that, bhai, it's open source project, I don't know. You are not paying me for this. Now if you have to fix it, you come, bring your contributor, remove this library, put something else. Conflicts, that open source project is like in a bad shape. Legal issues, again you are taking libraries, don't know what is the license term. You have put it, things working. But at the end of it, a corporate is using that particular library. There is a transitive dependency which is having some licenses which should not be used without a citation. You are in the problem. Tech stack, you have used with Java developers are here, right? Say something very old. Java is still there, it's rocking. But after some years, that probably become obsolete, and you don't have the bandwidth to upgrade that. So people who are consumers, they are actually suffering. They come to you. What do you do? First thing, you exit from that project, and you go and create a new open source project. That's the fun. That's the fun, and that's bad actually. And of course, poor planning and execution. How many of you know this story? Can you tell which library?
Core.js.
Huh?
Core.js.
It's not Core.js. It's called Faker. Yeah, how many of you know Faker.js? Yeah? Yeah? This is a story from Faker. The guy gone really wild, and then he posted this publicly. I don't know how many of you can read it. He says that respectfully, I am no longer going to support Fortune 500s and other small size companies with my free work. And the last line said, take this as an opportunity to send me a 6-figure yearly contract or fork the project and have someone else to work on it. This is a very, very well-known library, guys. Many people are using it, especially developers. One fine day, I'm doing upgrade, npm install is not working. It's just giving one line, single sentence that I cannot pronounce here. So this is the situation of a maintainer when they are actually lacking support. You cannot really take these things for granted. You probably can't read, but I'll underline a few things. The first one says play it nice. Second one says have gone beyond simply taking advantage of our work, not contributed a single dime towards our continued development and maintenance. Companies we have identified have actively violated the GPL and even our trademark. This is a company, very well-known open source project. People, big giants have taken them without giving them a single penny, without even telling them that they are behind it. Not only that, even violating all the trademarks and everything. So this is the situation that you also may get into once your project becomes really big. I wish that it becomes big as a maintainer. So you have to do all your groundwork so that you don't get into issues like this. You have to make your clause proper. You have to make your licensing proper. You have to talk your project in such a way that everybody feels that it is you who owns it. Even tomorrow some corporate comes, it is somebody who's like you who is behind it, right? So these are the things that I wanted to kind of quickly touch base, that as a maintainer, like what you may have to go through and what you have to remember. So I want to kind of end saying that, it's been probably thousands of decades that made us human. And we're in a civilization, we have a culture. Open source, I see it the same way, it's a culture. And if you want it to be civilized, including myself, we have to behave in certain way. Either we are a contributor or a maintainer. We have to really have our reasons to contribute to open source or maintain a project. If you don't have a reason, we have 1,000 other things to do in our life. We're all busy. So with that, I conclude my talk. Thank you guys for listening to me. If you want to further know about open source, this is my channel, you can go. I have a lot of videos that I keep reading on open source. And there's a book that I've written, which is there. I'll be sharing this link. And if you want to connect, this is the code basically. So thank you again for listening to me. Any questions? Last minute.
Raising issue is also a personal contribution.
What is that?
Raising issue.
Raising issue is also a part of contribution, yes. Once you're creating issue, is part of the contribution. There are different kind of open source contribution acknowledgement model. Through that you can acknowledge that, okay, this person has raised issue, so I'm giving he or her the open source contribution.
Sometimes what it does,
Sometimes whatever the AWS, I know AWS when I started, I was using SDK in the JavaScript. I know some vulnerability, I raise the issue, I provide the solution on that issue itself. And then later it was adopted by them.
They didn't give you the contribution.
So how means this thing happens, right?
This thing happens. It's very common. It depends on like what kind of model that particular project has adopted. So if a particular project has adopted that if you are improving a project or a product by raising an issue, you are given as that you have contributed to this particular project. It is not necessarily that every community and every project has to do in the same level. Some project is like it has to be very tangible, it has to be a code change or a documentation change or a build file change or a make file change. Then only they are actually going to give you as a open source contribution. You know, source code somehow was changed directly. Done. Sure. Yeah, so you're running out of time. Thank you very much.